Hazel always knew there was something special about her cat Mooney, but she's still shocked when Mooney opens his mouth to tell her he's just had a vision. An ancient evil has awoken after centuries of sleep, and only one man can stop it, the legendary warrior Beowulf. Unfortunately, it's been over 1,000 years since he slayed a dragon, and he's been reincarnated as this guy. His name is Victor, and he's more unemployed millennial slacker than mighty warrior.
Greetings, people of Earth.
Hi, everyone.
It is I, Grant Likerd, and...
Angie Dudas.
Did you forget your name for a second?
No, I was just making sure the cat didn't jump up and knock the camera over.
This time on It's Like a Book Report but Fun, we're talking about Rorschach. And our cat just jumped up on the desk and we're worried he's going to knock over the camera. Thank you.
We should probably leave that in, just so you know what it takes to make a 8-second video, or 8-minute video. Anyways, go on, Grant.
This time on It's Like a Book Report but Fun, we're talking about Rorschach by Tom King and Jorge Fornes. Is that it? Fornes. And oh boy, Hachimachi, we got a lot to talk about, am I right? I mean, I think we both liked it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good story. It was very interesting, and it was a lot.
Believe it or not, this time I took notes. I never do that.
I did not.
Okay, so I mean, I think we have a lot to unpack. I mean, I think a lot of what we're going to be saying sounds like criticism, but it's really not. I mean, it's an interesting book. I mean, he definitely takes some, how do I put it, some weird turns.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily fault him for taking weird turns. But I might point it out and be like, that was kind of weird, and I'm not sure if it 100% worked the way he wanted it to.
Yeah. Sorry. I got really close to the camera. You saw my nose. Sorry.
So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is, you've never read Watchmen.
No. I've seen the movie, and I saw it once, and yeah, so...
So I was thinking after this, maybe one of the comic books that we review should be Watchmen.
Yeah, maybe in a couple months.
So you felt like this comic book was like so dark that you were actually like drained by it?
Yeah, to be honest.
So I feel like you can read this comic book and enjoy it without having read Watchmen. I mean, I don't know, because I've read Watchmen a million times.
Right.
I mean, did you have trouble figuring things out?
I mean, there were some parts that I was like, wait, because they kept talking about squids.
So yeah, so that part's not in the movie. At the end of the comic book, what Ozymandias does is he creates this giant squid monster, and he teleports it into the middle of Times Square, and I guess that's what ends the Cold War, because Russia and the United States were gearing up to start murdering each other, and then they realized, like, oh, there's
a giant squid.
There's a giant squid. We should probably take care of that problem instead. So one of the things that this book does is it brings up the idea of, like, hey, what would having like a giant squid monster just appear in Times Square one day, and then nobody ever really explains why that happened? What would that do to the general population? And one of the things that you see is that, like, doomsday preppers are acting even crazier.
Yeah, I mean, you could equate it to kind of like how people are acting like when COVID hit.
Yes.
Kind of similar.
So I did a lot of research, and that was actually one of the things that Tom King mentioned, that it is supposed to kind of be a COVID allegory, and that people were acting kind of crazy. The first thing I think we should say about the comic book before we get too far along is that Rorschach doesn't actually appear.
Right.
The character of Rorschach from Watchmen does not appear. There are people who are doing copycat crimes of his, and people who...
Inspired?
Yeah, but even beyond that, there's some people who actually think that they're like the reincarnation of Rorschach, which I think it's kind of left ambiguous whether they actually believe that or they're just saying that.
I mean, so could that be a religion allegory? Or a cult allegory?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if I would say that it's a cult, because it's just like 3 or 4 people who believe that they might be Rorschach, but...
Or would it be mass hysteria? I don't know. I mean, you know.
So the thing that I think is funny about that is, you know, I'm sure a lot of people avoided this comic book because they were like, hey, you know, Rorschach died at the end of Watchmen.
Right.
Like, why are they making Rorschach comic books? That's stupid. But then, like, other people are going to buy this because they're like, oh boy, I want to see more adventures with Rorschach, and you're not going to get it, so...
No, you're going to get a crazy ride.
So I have a question for you, Angie.
Yes.
Would you be surprised to learn that Tom King did not want this to be a Rorschach comic book?
I mean, I can kind of see maybe it was like he was going for more like a detective vibe, and and now it's a Rorschach comic. I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, if they had not had Rorschach in this comic book, it probably wouldn't have changed the comic book too much. I mean, the fact that the murderers in this comic book, or the bad guys in this comic book, dress like Rorschach, is kind of incidental to the plot. Like, I mean, they could have had them dress like anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, it made me think of like a 70s like detective thing. That one of the characters in it kind of reminded me of a young James Caan.
And also in this comic book, Robert Redford is president, which, I don't know, seems kind of random. I mean, I guess he's gotten into a little bit of politics, so I actually thought that was an All the President's Men homage, which I know, because I used the word homage, everybody's going to freak out. But this actually segues into my next topic, which is, in interviews, Tom King said this comic book is actually more based on the Watchmen TV show than the comic book or the movie. So I watched a little bit of the Watchmen TV show, and that's not to say that I didn't like it. It's just that I get really, really busy and there's way too much TV.
Right.
So I was a little bit confused by that. But apparently Robert Redford is the president in that TV show as well. I don't know if Robert Redford actually makes an appearance on the TV show. I can't remember.
I mean, he was in like the Marvel movies as like a bad guy, whatever, politician.
Right, which I think that was also supposed to be like a reference to like the movies he made in the 1970s, where they were like very like conspiracy theorist and all of that.
You know what else this kind of reminded me of? The Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, very conspiracy heavy, very... It's one of those stories where you can't keep track of who's backstabbing who and who the good guy is, and etc.